Hello everyone, Dr. Michael Lamas here today for teaching subjects, and today I want to discuss the important distinction between transitive and intransitive verbs. And mastering this concept is important for clear and effective communication in English, and hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll be well equipped to identify and use these verbs accurately. Okay, so first I want to start by discussing the fundamental role of verbs in English, and verbs are words that represent action, occurrence, or state. And without verbs, our sentences wouldn't function effectively. So when we discuss verbs in grammar, we're usually concerned with their role in conveying what the subject does, experiences, or becomes. Now, verbs are not a monolith. Verbs are not a monolith. They are divided into different types based on their functions within the sentence. And today we're just going to focus on two primary types, which are transitive and intransitive verbs. And understanding how these verbs type functions is important for effective sentence construction. Okay, so first let's start with transitive verbs. Now, transitive verbs require a direct object to complete their meaning. So in other words, the action of a transitive verb passes from the subject to an object. And without a direct object, the sentence may feel incomplete or lack essential meaning. So for example, if we take the sentence, she kicked the ball, here kicked is a transitive verb because it acts on the ball, which is the direct object. Now without mentioning the ball, we're left wondering, what did she kick? Which is why the object is necessary for clarity. So here are some common examples of transitive verbs and actions. In the sentence, he reads books, reads is a transitive verb and books is the direct object. If I say the professor explained the concept clearly, explained is the transitive with the concept serving as the direct object. Now, one way to identify transitive verbs is by asking the question what or whom after the verb. If these questions lead you to a direct object, you have a transitive verb. And recognizing this structure is key to correctly using and interpreting transitive verbs in both simple and also complex sentences. So now let's turn our attention to intransitive verbs. Unlike transitive verbs, intransitive verbs do not need a direct object to complete their meaning. They are complete on their own and do not transfer action to an object. So for example, in the sentence, the baby cries, cries is intransitive because there's no object receiving the action. The action remains contained within the subject. Now, intransitive verbs are common and can function independently, making them especially useful in sentences that emphasize an action or state without an object. Okay, so in this slide, we see some examples of intransitive verbs. So let's take the sentence, he sleeps soundly. Sleeps is an intransitive verb. It does not need a direct object to make sense. Similarly, in the sentence, she laughed unexpectedly, laughed stands alone without an object. Now, one of the defining characteristics of intransitive verbs is their ability to function independently. When you see a verb that completes the sentence without an object, you're likely dealing with an intransitive verb. It's a straightforward way to add clarity and completeness to your sentence without overcomplicating them. Okay, so here let's compare transitive and intransitive verbs side by side. Transitive verbs require an object to clarify their meaning. If I say, he writes a letter, writes is a transitive verb because it needs a letter to complete the action. In contrast, if I say, he sleeps, sleeps does not require any additional information. It's a complete idea on its own, making it intransitive. Now, a quick trick to identify transitive is to ask what or whom after the verb. If the question makes sense, then there's an object answering it. You're likely dealing with a transitive verb, and this is an effective way to differentiate between the two types. Okay, now let's go over some common pitfalls when working with transitive and intransitive verbs. A frequent mistake is assuming all verbs need objects. Many verbs, particularly intransitive ones, do not require any additional information to complete their meaning. Another common misconception involves confusing intransitive verbs with linking verbs, such as the words is or seem, which connect the subject to additional information rather than passing an action to an object. Also, remember the context matters. Some verbs can be transitive in one sentence and intransitive in another, depending on how they're used. So, for example, the word runs can be intransitive, as in she runs, but it could also be transitive, as in she runs a business. Okay, so now let's test your understanding with a few practice exercises. So, in each example, we'll try to determine if the verb is transitive or intransitive. In the sentence, the students studied, ask yourself if an object is needed. Similarly, in the sentence, she plays the piano beautifully, see if you can identify the verb type by asking what or whom questions. After you thought it over, you can see what type of verb. So for here, the answers for the first one, the students studied, that's intransitive. And then for she plays the piano beautifully is transitive, as in she plays is the action on the object, which is the piano. Okay, so let's summarize what we've covered. So transitive verbs are verbs that require a direct object. They transfer action to something or someone. Intransitive verbs, on the other hand, are complete on their own without needing an object. So when deciding between the two, remember the what or whom test for transitive verbs, which can help you clarify their functions in a sentence. And mastering these distinctions will improve both your comprehension and use of English, making your communication and writing more precise and effective. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. Like the video if you found this helpful. Also subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.